Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm going to be joined by Sean. Sean is a real estate entrepreneur that has built over 5 years a successful wholesaling company in Columbus, Ohio, and more recently launched a VA company to help more investors find motivated sellers through cold calling and texting. Sean is your stereotypical visionary, a brilliant person, and has a lot of great insights about how to run a team and how to get the most out of your marketing. We'll dive into that today. How you doing today, Sean?
Doing fantastic. How are you doing, Brandon?
Hey, doing awesome. Super excited for this podcast episode. It's great to finally get together and do this. I know we've been talking about this for a little bit. So for anybody not familiar with you yet that's listening, could you share a little bit about you? How do we know each other, your background, and kind of where you are today?
Yeah, so I think we've gotten connected pretty strongly in the last 6 months or so. You took over our SEO, PPC, helping us do the online streaming thing for our real estate company. And then we're in a couple different masterminds together. And yeah, that's it. And then I know we got a skiing trip planned this winter.
Yeah, that's right. I told you got to come out to Utah. Remind me where you're based.
I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, yeah, Columbus, Ohio. Just not too far from pretty much anywhere, right? That's at least in the United States, is that the advantage? Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your real estate company.
So started doing real estate 5.5 years ago, and started off just wholesaling properties, not really knowing a whole lot about real estate. Kind of just fell into it, not really knowing I wanted to do real estate, but not knowing which niche to get into. And luckily I fell into wholesaling because as far as from my opinion, it's a very well-rounded education. If you can find good deals, you can, do land development, you can do flipping, you can, hold rentals, but everything starts with finding that good deal. So we ended up starting doing nothing but wholesaling for the first 2 years. And then after a couple of years of doing it, we started to get more into the flipping side, building out, I think we've got built out about 70 rentals, long-term and short-term rentals over the last 3 years, and using the wholesaling business as the core thing that that funds everything else.
Yeah, I love that strategy. Like kind of like you were saying, if you can start with the deal, then there's a lot of different stuff that you can do based on that. It seems like most of the clients that we worked with, they have taken kind of a similar path. You start out by learning to acquire properties for wholesale purposes, and then you start being able to branch out into everything else. And throughout that, speaking of branching out, I don't know if this falls into that or if you call this like a completely different thing in your business. But as I understand it, you've taken some of the things that you were great at in the business and turned that into a service or a product for other real estate investors. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so 8 months ago, started doing a real estate virtual assistant business. And that was just I've always had really good relationships with my virtual assistants. I've been using them since I got into real estate. And, I went to Egypt 2 years ago, became really close with one of my guys. And as he kind of moved up through our company, he got to a point where we were using a third party to do our cold calling and texting. And he pretty much, he told me, hey, I think I can do this better for you than these other companies. And I'm always about split testing stuff, even if I was a little bit skeptical at first. I was like, all right, man, let's give it a try. And gave him a little piece of our business. And within a few, 2 months, he was doing better than the third party service I was actually happy with at the time. And then from there, just started having him do more for my business. And then some of the masterminds I'm in, I started sharing people, what was working within my company. And people started asking if I would do it for them. And so that's and now it's word of mouth stuff. So it's just grown organically from that. But it was all about trying to do do this crucial part of a service or, part of my business that I needed that I thought could be done better.
Yeah, understood. Well, And that's awesome. I love that story. I think there's a lot of investors that are looking to start some type of service business or product for investors because it just, I think for a lot of people, real estate investing is kind of their first branch into the business world. And then you start seeing all these other businesses and you get curious and you start doing that stuff. I'm really curious for you, what's so far has been unexpected. Like you saw this clean, seemingly simple path. I don't know if you thought it was simple. I know a lot of people do when they first start going down that path with the second business. But has it gone like you expected it to, or have there been bumps along the way that you didn't expect?
Definitely bumps along the way. I'm fortunate enough to where my partner with the company, he runs all of the operations side. And then I'm more, like making sure, making sure that our product is good and that it works well for my business and telling people about it. But like, kind of the sales and marketing side. And I thought, like I've been doing sales and marketing nonstop for the last 6 years. I think of myself as being really good at it. And then I just, I realized like I'm really good at sales and marketing for, to single family homeowners. But then like, like kind of business to business world is just so different. And I know I've talked to you about this in the past. It's like, trying to wrap my head around like one of the masterminds we're in, going there and just like realizing how deep it goes and just how clueless I really am to that whole side of sales and marketing.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's in some ways way more complicated, in other ways a little bit more simple. But it's yeah, I've had to recalibrate some of my team in that, where they come from those other places. Then we get into this marketing to motivated sellers. It's like, calm down. This isn't that crazy, right? You're not going to have these really weird, like in the wholesale business, you're not going to have a case where a lead should be attributed to like 10 different marketing channels. In a business that outside of that, where people have these long, decision-making cycles and you overlap in a ton of different places, it can get really complicated. And there's a lot of going on, in terms of life cycle marketing and all that. So I think you're talking about Family Mastermind, right? When we were there and yeah.
It was a good experience. It was, definitely like I always like to be in the, feel like the small fish in the big pond. And I just felt so completely clueless there, especially the first day. It was this real eye-opening experience. Like, oh man, like there's so much to learn and so much room for growth.
Yeah, totally understood. And it's a different world out there for sure. But it's awesome that you understand who you're marketing to and that whole situation. I think that makes a big difference. It's something I wish I had when I first got into this industry 5 years ago. Was, if I knew how real estate businesses function, then it would have made it a lot easier of a learning curve. So there's value to that. So tell me about this, these VA services. What kinds of things are your clients utilizing this for? And if a follow-up question to that would be, how were they doing it before they worked with this service? And because of that, like, what are some of the differences that they're seeing? Or, I'm hoping that we can get some actionable insights out of this as to like, this is how you can do this better. And obviously working with your company is one way to pull that off, but I'm curious kind of where people are going wrong and how they're fixing it.
So I think like one thing that I didn't realize, like I had hired so we do cold calling, we do texting, we do lead management or follow-up specialist or junior acquisition person, kind of whatever you want to call it. And like I had hired people myself when I was early, gone on Upwork and tried to find some experienced cold callers. And like the issue I ran into then, where I've really seen, I think the biggest value or challenge for somebody kind of doing it their own is just that whole management piece. Virtual, like unless you're tracking your KPIs really tight, it's just kind of hard to make sure that somebody around the world is doing what they say they are as much as they're doing. And I mean, like with cold calling, you can track metrics, but there's just also like, lots of different things that can go wrong. Like, you have a cold caller in the Philippines and the hurricane comes through and knocks out the power for a week, or connectivity issues, or dialer goes down. So like a lot of that, I think when I did it on my own, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, before I started using different services, that was like where I fell short. Was just thinking, oh, this is just like hiring somebody in the office, and this won't be that tough. But I know a lot of people do it on their own, and it's definitely nice because you can have more, obviously, like we all want control over our process, and being able to have that control of this is exactly what the script is going to be. If I want to do live transfers, I can do live transfers. So that's like a big advantage of people who go out and do it on their own. But there's just like a lot, I've learned there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you don't necessarily think about at first.
Yeah, well, and the more of it that you control, the less freedom you have from the details of those things as well, right? So it's good, and it's also bad. I think for me, I've shifted as a person a lot in terms of that. Like at the closer to the beginning of my business, I wanted that like detailed control of everything, and then as you start to elevate in your business, you really just want you want those details managed, but you don't want to be the one that manages them. So then your options become some type of third party that's doing that, or somebody on your team that's accountable to those things. And all those things are difficult, and all of those involve you relinquishing some level of control. And it's it's interesting just thinking about my own journey through that. I'm curious if anybody feels similar, kind of hearing what you're talking about, or if you've gone through a similar experience yourself where you kind of value that control more at the beginning, and then at some point, if you could just get the results without having to control every detail, that's the real thing, right? Because you have so many opportunities that you can be chasing.
Yeah, there's only so much time in the day. So like, what's like the first thing you can get off of your plate, or, what's something that somebody, because in a perfect world, like you would have people in the US sitting here cold calling every day, or, but that's just not scalable, and it's, too expensive. And if you can reach so many more people, but yeah, that's always something I struggle with too, is holding on to stuff for too long. And hindsight's 2020. It's like, man, if I would have known what I know now, like I would have let go of this quicker. I would have let go of that quicker. And that's been kind of like the fun part in this new venture. The last year has been like taking a lot of the stuff that I've learned over the last 5.5 years, and all the mistakes I've made, and just being like, okay, well, this round, I'm not going to do this. I'm like, I'm going to try to hand this off as quick as possible. So yeah, it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, but completely believable. Here's a question, because there's kind of two different things you hear around this a lot. You hear this idea of like you have to hold on and be patient because it's going to improve, and you have to let the process do its thing and get to that point where you're having success with something. Like maybe let's just say cold call marketing right now, for example, something that you're familiar with. And then there's the other side of cutting your losses quick, right? Like the whole like fire quick mentality, or whatever the case is. How do you know when to be either way? Like, have you seen situations where you've held on too long and it's or not too long, but you've held on for a long time when you didn't want to, and it's actually benefited you well? And what's the difference between those situations and the situations where you did hold on too long and you should have let go?
Yeah, I think part of like being an entrepreneur, I think an entrepreneur in general, and I know me personally, like I'm very emotional. Like I like to make fast decisions. If a marketing channel's not working, like I'll pull the plug on it. Where like something like that, it takes time. Like you're not gonna be able to really get the metrics, that you need. You're gonna make an emotional decision instead of something that's data driven. So I know I've we've sent mail for like 4 years, and then last year we started doing TV commercials, and we cut our mail because our mail had slowed down a bit. It was still good. It was very consistent, but we had cut it off, and we cut it off for like almost like 8 months because we were spending just a ton of money on network TV ads. And that was like a horrible decision because for us, TV didn't work well, but then we also took away resources from our mail, which was, super consistent, steady, It's not like, I think maybe it's like a 5 or 6 return on a dollar. It's not like super crazy, but it was very little work, kind of like PPC for us is like, it's just inbound leads generated consistently without having to get lost in the weeds. So that's definitely somewhere where I've, like pulled the plug too early, or just like, just made more of an emotional decision instead of really waiting for drama or reacting on the drama. I And then I think like one thing I've always learned too is like, it's like where it is kind of good for my own experience to not wait too long and to just make that fast decision, has been with like personnel. Like every time I felt like there was somebody on our team who didn't fit our core values or just weren't a good fit, like my tendency is always to like try to get things to improve. We're going to put them on a performance plan. We're going to do their quarterly review, and we're going to coach them back. And I don't know if it's because I'm a bad coach or just what it is, but it's always been, I've never gone back from feeling that way and been proved wrong. It's always been like, man, like, why did you wait so long? Probably because of the emotion behind it. It's hard to let people go, but that's like one instance where it's always been like, cut the cord quickly and move on.
Yeah. So would you say generally with marketing, you got to move slower than your gut, and with people, you have to move faster?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. And everybody's gut's going to be different, of course. So that's, but that's interesting to hear kind of for you, what your experience has been. That's, and I've had, by the way, very similar experiences. So I don't think you're alone in that at all. If you, because we do focus on marketing more than anything else in this podcast specifically, if we're talking about what you've learned from a marketing standpoint, specifically regarding cold call, because I imagine you have a lot of insights there that you didn't have before, because you're able to see not just what's happening for your own business and the granular details of that, but then also what's happening for other people's businesses as well. What are you seeing right now, and kind of as a follow-up question to that, what is the difference between those that are performing really well with those channels right now and those that aren't doing as well?
Yeah. So I'm not a very good detailed person. My partner Zane, like he can explain like the metrics of what's working. One thing though with that, like one thing generally in cold calling, like it's obviously coming like just like anybody who's getting marketing, it all comes down to your sales process and having a really good sales process in place, no matter how good your marketing is. If you're not, if you're not managing those leads well, that's probably like the biggest thing I see with people who are performing well versus people who aren't. So it's gotten to the point too where like, we're not taking on people who haven't been wholesaling or marketing for properties for at least a year, like ideally 2 years, because we just found they don't have a sales process in place, and it just sucks the energy out of us. So we'd rather work with people who've been doing it a lot longer. But I know one thing is like on the texting side, we've always been really good with texting. But when we started doing it for other people, it really just made us go so much deeper, because it's one thing like, having, like 4 or 5 launch controls for my own company. But if I've got like, 5 or 10 launch control companies for good friends who I'm like telling them that like, hey, we can do this, or this is going to perform, trust us, puts this like pressure on, it really puts this pressure on me and my partner Noah to like, okay, like let's get this right. Like what can we do to revamp, our process mapping and our templates, and like we use launch control. So we'll jump on performance reviews with launch twice a month to just like, get really in depth on like, this is what we're going to split test this template. We're going to split test this way to kind of close the call and get them online. And so that's been a huge benefit to just the real estate side and, the service side.
Yeah, understood. I don't mean for this question to be upsetting to you, just going to say kind of like how I've seen it, and I'm ready for you to tell me what I'm seeing wrong or if I'm like spot on. But what seems to have been the rhetoric for a while with texting is that it's dying. And every time I look at it, I'm like, how is it still not dead? Because it just keeps on going. I don't know if you felt that same way. Like it seems like there's always been like these different deadlines of like, by this date, it's going to be dead. By this date, it's going to be dead. And then it just doesn't happen. What the heck is going on with it? And what do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, so I remember like when like 4 years ago, I was at a mastermind or a real estate event, and the guy up there was talking about how it was his best channel, but you better, strike the iron when it's hot because it's not going to be around much longer. There's going to be all kinds of regulations. And geez, I know one of the bigger text services just got shut down a week or two ago. But like the service that we use has like always been extremely cognizant of doing everything in a TCPA compliant way, not even allowing you scrub it, like not having you scrub against the DNC list, but personally doing it, and then just making sure that it's in a way that's done well. So we'll see what happens. Like, anything could happen, and I've been hearing it for so long. But what I've seen is like over the last 4 years, that like our biggest dollar in, dollar out has consistently been texting every year. And then as we've dialed in our processes more, it's gotten better. But that's misleading too, though, because I know like to get a cold call or a text contract, it's about half the price versus a web or PPC. But when we ran our first quarter numbers, those PPC and mail leads are converting in an average of 5 days into a contract, where our outbound marketing is taking 50 days. So, and then there's all kinds of costs, included in all that follow up and everything. So,
yeah, I mean, there's cost there, and then there's, what I'm really curious. Have you seen a difference in your spreads? Do you have larger spreads through more inbound channels, or are you pretty consistent across all channels, or do you not know?
a little bit. No, I know absolutely. It's a little bit more on inbound, maybe like 10% more.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful to know. Usually, people tell us 20 to 30% is kind of normal. It's going to be so different in each market, and sample size as well. But it's interesting to say. I was just writing some internal documentation for like us and our team, because we're bringing on some new people and stuff like that, and teaching what are the things we need to know about our clients, and kind of did a rundown on all the different marketing channels. And for texting, it was like, I don't know what the heck's going on with it. It might be dead soon, like next week, and it might live for 10 years. I know it's really cheap though. From a per deal basis. And that seems to have always been pretty true. Like so many companies, it's like their lowest cost per deal. And by extension, usually a pretty great return on investment. But it's really hard to measure the real cost in terms of like, focus in the company, depending on the quality of the leads and how do the spreads affect it, and all those kinds of things. Like we know for sure, like a lot of people would say a 10x return in texting is the same as like a 6x return on PPC when it comes to like what is equally beneficial to the business. But so many opinions out there. It's hard it's not apples to apples at all.
No, it's, yeah. And I don't know, like our philosophy has always been having like, so like we do a pretty high volume and we're only in one market. So it's always been like, how can we maximize our marketing dollars as much as possible, other than TV? Cause I was just burning money, but it's, yeah, it's like, this balance of you can only do so much outbound marketing or, outbound marketing. You eventually run out of data, skip tracing. And then with the inbound stuff, it's, usually your budget. And then also just when are you going to reach that point of diminishing returns? So we've always been like, let's just have this balance and have a lot of lead managers to, help get through all these outbound leads we have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the standard advice that I've given people is that there's kind of two ways to grow a wholesale company. The first one is going to be one market, many marketing channels. The second one is going to be one marketing channel in many different markets. We have clients that do both of those. What is your opinion on one of those models versus the other, and why did you choose the one that you chose?
Um, so I got some advice pretty early on. I've been maybe wholesaling for a year, and I was having some success. And like a mentor of mine was just like, man, go deeper, not wider. I see all these people who like go into other markets, and like he's like, man, Columbus is this honey hole. It's a great opportunity. This is where all your connections are, all your buyers, your title company, your contractors, everything. Like if you put energy into going into other places, that's going to take away from your opportunity here, and there's more than enough here. And then I think the other thing for me is that like my style of sales is like I'm a big advocate of getting face to face with people. Like, we sign contracts over the phone, but like I always tell my salespeople, like if somebody's texting us, they have the advantage. If we're over the phone with somebody, we're on neutral ground. But when we get face to face with people, there's just this huge advantage that we have because we can read body language. We can touch somebody on the shoulder. We can make this emotional connection. So I think it's kind of been a combination of my experience or the advice I got early on, and then just my own style of selling. But I know it. I know the virtual model works really well, especially if you're getting inbound leads where there's generally a lot more motivation. And I see so many people do it, but for me, it's like I'm constantly want to chase squirrels in all these different directions. And it's just like, like just focus on one thing and try not to get too distracted.
Yeah, yeah. I think both models are really valid. I see a lot of people with a lot of success in each of those models. Although one interesting differentiator is it seems like COVID was kind of a time where the virtual model became a lot more possible. It became a lot more normal to buy a house virtually, and so many of the companies I know that have started after COVID, they are more virtual across many markets, and they can pull it off. And then the people that have been around for 20 years, it doesn't make sense to branch into other markets because they're so good at what they do. I definitely see pros and cons on either side.
It's definitely more scalable, like a lot more scalable too. If you're doing that virtual model, you're not limited to having boots on the ground, and you can go into the other markets and do it from a central location.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen people get absolutely destroyed trying that though, and I've seen people do well. I think it's just being the best at what it is that you're doing is what really makes the difference. And speaking of which, you mentioned before that you don't really take on anybody as a client that you don't think has a good sales process. And one of your metrics for that is how long have you been doing that, and that's usually an indicator. Although there's you probably would agree, I'd assume, that how long someone's been doing something is often not a great indicator because there's just think about it, right? You can find people who've been specializing in one thing for 20 years in their life and they're still horrible at it because some people are just those people, right? And different companies have better processes and things like that. So I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are. Like if someone's listening to this and they're just wondering, well, I don't actually know if I do have a good sales process. How do you look at your own business and realize, do I have a good sales process or am I lacking there?
The first thing that stands out to me is like, are you tracking your KPIs and making your decisions based on that? Are you, one thing we do every week is we'll set like our weekly KPI goal for the upcoming week. We'll review that the following Monday. People will be red, green, or yellow. Based on if they hit their goal or how they did with that, and then we do that monthly, and then when we do our quarterly reviews. So I feel like that's like one big thing is using that you're tracking stuff, you're making your decisions, you're changing stuff based on what the data is telling you. I think like one huge really difficult part of sales, and it's taken me so long to wrap my head around this, is that like I'm somebody who does not work well with systems and processes. I'm a very like do something different every time kind of person, and I've always like been an advocate that sales is that way. Like you can't treat this person the same as this person. So like you can't make a systems or a process. You just got to go with your gut, man. And I've definitely changed my opinion on that a lot, especially recently, just because like how much of that decision making can you can never with sales you can never take all of it out, but there's a lot more that you can take out and you can make duplicatable. Like one thing we started doing was like when a lead comes in, like how motivated is that on a scale of 1 to 4? We're going to rate it before we actually even talk to that person. So then like a 1 is very motivated, a 4 is not very motivated. So we're going to have our lead managers work the 4 completely different than they're going to work the 1, and they're not going to have to make that kind of gut check. They're going to have to make some gut calls or some emotional decisions within the process. But we like if you work a 4 this way and you work a 1 this way, we've eliminated a lot of that. So I think stuff like that is what I really have seen like help me out a lot. Obviously, like what does your sales team look like? How well defined are their roles? Do you have systems and processes set up? Are you meeting? Like one huge thing that really changed us around was not only like we've been doing daily meetings for about 2 years, or we meet 4 days a week with the lead managers and the acquisition people and the sales manager. So like, are you doing weekly meetings? How are people getting feedback? How are you coaching them? Those are all things I think that go, into how well is your sales process.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And I know you're not the numbers guy who knows every single number in the business, but I think being that you can answer this next question really well, like from your standpoint, what is you talked about having that KPI scorecard basically and tracking the right things. That's one thing that all the companies that are the best at sales, unless they just have like one really good salesperson that somehow performs awesome despite them not giving them the circumstance in which they should do that, which does happen sometimes, but it doesn't scale, right? Sometimes just the right person in the wrong process can work. But most companies that are repeatedly producing great sales outcomes, they do tend to have metrics. What are the metrics that you consider most important or that have made the biggest impact on your business to be tracking as it comes to sales?
Yeah. I mean, one is like, because we do a lot of outbound marketing, it's hard to get people back on the phone with cold calling and texting. So like what percentage of new leads in the previous week were we able to make contact with? We always want to see that over 80%. That's, I think, like within our lead management side, like that's the biggest KPI, because that's an indicator. If that's really low, then there could be a lot of things broken. But if we're consistently over 80%, then we know our process is working well. I think, and then, I mean, contracts and revenue, but I think that, I think that like the speed to lead is what one of my friends calls it, which is more important on the inbound side. Like how fast are you getting a hold of these people? How fast are you getting out there to have an appointment with them? Yeah.
Understood. Those are things we advocate for 100%. Contact rate is something we track across all our clients. The speed to contact new leads is one that we notice a major difference between our clients that actually track that and our clients that don't track that.
I was just going to say, I know when we onboarded with you and you gave us that sheet, and whoever onboarded us said, sometimes people do this, sometimes people don't. And it's like, man, I love this. Like, I want you guys to know exactly, which leads are good, which leads are bad, which ones we like, like I want you guys to make your decisions off of that. I thought that was one thing I was impressed with right away was that not only are you guys providing that, but you're saying if you guys want to do good, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah. Well, and not just that, but holding our team accountable to the outcomes there. I think that's the gap between like most marketing companies and their clients is that the people internally within the company that are responsible for generating the results aren't actually measured based on the results. And then the company cares about the results, right? So then you have like difference of of priorities, and it creates issues. So kind of having that full feedback loop, I think is super important. And yeah, all I was saying is that some people like think they're tracking that. Like, have you ever fallen into this trap as a business owner where the way that you measure a metric is you ask your team what that metric is? You're like, hey, just making sure, guys, you are getting to the leads within 60 seconds. And the answer is always yes. And if you're not, like, if you don't have it in the system where you're actually tracking it and there's clear accountability around if it's happening or not, people find a lot of stuff that they didn't expect to find.
Yeah. The thing with like, I think we've been implementing like the scorecard with, our four lead managers and our two acquisition people. And then it's even like the integrator is on there and the sales managers in there, and just everybody knowing like that we want to push our goals for the following week, but knowing that you're going to get onto this Monday morning meeting and you're either, you're going to be green or you're going to be red or you're going to be yellow, and everyone's going to judge you based on that. Like that, I mean, accountability is huge. And that's, like any way you can tie in those metrics into a group setting, and like people will bust their ass to to hit their benchmarks for the week.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I totally agree. Well, this has been awesome, Sean. I appreciate all your insights on everything and kind of your journey as an entrepreneur and how you found success with this. Is there anything else that you would want to share with the people listening to the podcast?
Yeah, no, man, this has been really solid. I think I just end with this is like, man, just try to get into as many high level rooms as you can, get into situations that are uncomfortable. And, there's like in this business, there's just so much, you're never going to know it all. And like right when you think you get something figured out, you realize just how much deeper you can go on stuff. So yeah, I think that's like, man, just, getting together with people. And if I can ever help anybody out, like I'm a big network relationship person. So yeah, just connect with people, man.
Yeah, I love that. If somebody does want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram's probably the best one, Sean underscore or period on Grabow, or they can email me at Sean SEAN at res-va.com.
All right, very cool. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for taking the time to be on the show today.
Likewise, take it easy, Brandon.